Days flew by. Sonny only had 4 weeks to prepare himself for the journey into the dream realm, so he barely had a second to spare for sleep, much less preparation. That didn't matter though, because he was relentless. Each day he pushed his body and mind to their limits in an attempt to absorb as much knowledge and skills as possible in that short amount of time. His days were packed with solo study as he stuck to his plan as Master Jet had suggested. He was focusing on survival lessons. He studied with Teacher Julius, slowly learning how to survive and take care of himself in the absence of civilization. Their lessons ranged from comparatively simple, like various ways to produce fire, to much more obscure and esoteric, like celestial navigation. What was so hard about celestial navigation? Well, as it turned out, the dream realm was not consistent in terms of star geography. Different regions had different stars and constellations, as well as a different number of moons. While the sun seemed to be the same, its behavior was highly unpredictable. Still, with sufficient knowledge, one could find ways to study the skies and subsequently navigate through the world. Most of these lessons were, supposedly, included in the various school curriculums. Most of his fellow sleepers had grown up learning these basics. However, learning something from a textbook and learning the same thing from an actual awakened were two completely different matters. Teacher Julius had a habit of going much more in depth when explaining his subject. Thanks to this time-consuming habit of his, Sonny not only learned about the what, but also often gained glimpses into the why. This nascent understanding of the underlying principles of the dream realm environments gave him a deeper understanding of the world he was about to be thrown into. He wasn't sure how useful this information would be, but it seemed to calm his nerves, making him feel like he had a greater understanding of the new life that lay before him. Even the lessons in dead languages, which Sonny had initially judged to be useless, turned out to be much more interesting than he could ever imagine. This was, in large part, because it concerned the spell itself. After all, the spell communicated with humans in one of those dead languages. By knowing the language, he was able to understand the message's deeper meanings. The simplest example of this was Nephis and her true name, Changing Star. While technically correct, this translation failed to properly convey the exact meaning, which meant that while the other sleepers were still in the dark as to what her aspect was, Sonny had clues. By understanding the grammatical structure of the rune language, it was easy to extrapolate and see that the correct translation would have technically been Star of Change. On top of that, it turned out that there were different runes for the word change, each with its own connotation. Depending on what exact rune was used to relay the meaning of the name, it could also mean ruinous star or star of misfortune. A small change in wording and connotation could mean a world of difference in real life. Sonny, who had never seriously studied before, found the process of acquiring vast amounts of theoretical knowledge strange, numbing, and exhausting. But it was also exhilarating. Knowledge was something that only the privileged had access to, and now Sonny was considered one of them, at least so long as he managed to stay alive. While he was new to academia, he quickly picked up on a sobering fact, one he wished he realized sooner. It was also this authority over knowledge that kept them in positions of power, creating a vicious cycle of inequality. The poor had no opportunity to study, and without the advantage of a good education, they had no way out of their circumstances. If they could study, they could at least maybe reach the bare minimum requirements for most jobs. But for so much of his life, that was so far out of reach in even his wildest dreams. But now, Sonny was one of those privileged people. More than that, he was at the pinnacle of social hierarchy. Not only had he gained access to an unlimited amount of knowledge, but even his basic needs like food and shelter were also taken care of by the government. allowing him to fully focus on the single goal of developing himself as an awakened. This sudden transformation would have sent him into a whirlpool of philosophical reflection if he had any time to spare. But that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. When he didn't have classes, Teacher Julius insisted on holding practical lessons every other day. Even if some of them had to be done in virtual reality simulations, he insisted on using the full immersion stations, which enhanced physical feedback. As a result, Sonny was bone-tired and utterly exhausted. The good thing was that with such an amount of exercise, coupled with his newly reforged body, Sonny had never been in better shape. Even without combat training, he could feel his strength, stamina, and agility improving by leaps and bounds. The peculiar rebirth he had experienced after completing the first nightmare had enhanced the innate potential of his body, bringing it to the peak of the human condition. But now it was up to him to realize that potential, with sweat, effort, and a lot of hard work. Practical application of wilderness survival techniques provided him with the opportunity to do so. By day, he was a proper student, taking on a full course load and additional study and practice in an attempt to make up for lost time. But by night, Sonny secretly collected information about other sleepers and practiced shadow control while most of the others were relaxing, socializing, or sleeping. His shadow was independent enough to be sent on scouting missions without his direct control. It would sneak here and there, listening in on the conversations and observing different classes where sleepers had to demonstrate their aspect abilities. Then, after Sonny had finished his supper and returned to his room, it would come back and share everything it had heard and seen during the day. The only problem with this arrangement was that the shadow, despite its outward snarkiness, turned out to be rather naive. It didn't quite understand how the human world worked, and as such, often failed to distinguish between useful information and meaningless chatter. Most nights, Sonny received nothing of value. Not really. His shadow would prattle on with the latest academy gossip. Sonny listened, trying to find anything useful in these information dumps, and fought against the sleep that pulled at his bones. This was how he learned that in the Sleeper Academy, romance was in the air. It wasn't all that shocking. There were 100 beautiful young people locked underground in close proximity to each other, with the added spice of a deathly threat hanging over their heads. Many felt that life was short, and it was their time to seize the day. Passion bloomed in the shadow of approaching danger. Sonny felt like a complete outsider to this side of academic life. He had already positioned himself to be perceived as an unlikable lunatic, which didn't help with finding any romantic prospects. But even if he had wanted to, he simply had no time for anything except his lessons and training. And even if he wanted to, he knew deep down that that would be a terrible idea. He was wary of getting too close to anybody, afraid that a situation would arise where he would have no choice but to divulge his true name. His nights were full up anyway. He was busy enough with gathering information and slowly learning about the scope and details of various aspect abilities, and to a lesser extent, flaws. He was also working on developing and experimenting with his shadow control. The results had been very promising. He quickly found out that his shadow was able to enhance various objects outside of just his body. If it wrapped itself around a weapon, the weapon struck harder and delivered more powerful blows. If it was applied to an armor, the armor would become sturdier and harder to break. The enhancement was rather substantial, too. It was roughly twice as much as the initial value. All in all, this ability, if used correctly, could make him a powerhouse among the sleepers. Many combat aspects could deliver more speed or damage, and others could provide more defense and protection, but no other aspect seemed to be nearly as well-rounded and versatile as Shadow Slave. With the added utility of Shadow Sight, Shadow Step, and Shadow Scout, it was truly incredible. Just like that, day after day passed, slowly turning into weeks. Before Sonny even knew it, the winter solstice was already here. It was time for his next nightmare.
Hey amazing viewers, it's Sunny here. Thanks for sticking with us. By the time of the release of this video, only 8% of our viewers have joined the party by subscribing, and 92% of you might miss out on our next mind-blowing video. So what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and join the exclusive club.